Yesterday we learned about the laws of mikvah, chatzitza, and we mentioned that there's a three-way argument. There's a debate about the law of having a interposing um, um, separation between one's body and the water, how that works. It goes by the majority of the body. Do we divide the body and the hair as two separate entities? So there's the majority of the body as one type of rule. Then there's another rule about the majority of the hair, would be a second rule. Or is it all one body? And then we had a third way of learning, and that was that the hair itself is what we use this laws, these rules about majority or minority is only about the hair, but any other part of the body, we follow a more strict rule that any intervening substance would invalidate the mikvah. And I gave an example yesterday of what would happen if a person um, uh, if a woman left her ring on her finger and she went to mikvah. And the reason I gave that example, of course, it's a very practical, very a common type of issue that happens. And but I remember hearing a shiur from a Rav who once told us. During that shiur, he told us he once had a story where he was traveling like a 4-hour travel from a mikvah with his wife. And about an hour before they got home, she realized that she had her ring, and she thinks she had her ring on during the mikvah. And so they called another Rav, and the Rav said they should go back. So after this whole trip, they went 4 hours there to go to mikvah. They went 3 hours back. They had to go another 3 hours back to the mikvah a second time. Now, the question is that really obligated according to the letter of the law? Because from our Gemara, it does seem that if it's a minority of the body and it's something that a woman would possibly keep on her finger all the time, that she has no interest in taking it off. Seemingly, a ring would be something like that. I mean, women take showers with their rings. There's probably some women who never take their ring off. That would maybe be a room to say that you could just she went, we wouldn't tell her to go to mikvah that way. As I mentioned, the Ramah holds that preferably we don't have any type of intervening substance. But if a person went to mikvah already, maybe there's room to say that that it's okay. Of course, in the olden days, they would take off their rings. And in Shulchan Aruch, it talks about the case of a ring, and it mentions there that that would be considered an intervening substance. And seemingly, it has to do with the fact that in those days, number one, all women would knead the dough often, and kneading dough they don't want their ring on for when they knead dough, and other for other reasons maybe. But nowadays, there might be room to say that it's different. The practical side of things is different. And that would end up having a difference in halacha, meaning halacha doesn't change, but if the practical facts change, that means that the halacha has to be applied according to the practical facts of the day. And so maybe there's room to say that a ring is today is different than the rings of the past, and maybe there's room to say that we know it's on the minority of the body. Maybe there's room to say that a woman is not particular about taking it off, and she would keep it on all the time. at least some women. So the thing is, in Shulchan Aruch, it talks about majority of people, that we go by the common way of people. So even if one woman says, I'm not makbid, I'm not particular about this, it doesn't necessarily apply to her. It does apply to the general public. So that's number one. So that would cause there to be a reason to be strict. The other question, I guess, would be about her personally. Like, is she really not makbid? Is she really not particular about it? Maybe she does take it off every so often. Her ring, and likes to let her fingers have some air, feel that they're not tied with a string around, with a ring around it, for whatever reason, so it could be for her personally. Anyway, the bottom line is that the poskim talk about today's day and age rings, and there is a leniency that they give if a woman went to mikvah already and she had relations with her husband already. In that scenario, some rabbanim say you don't have to go back to mikvah because she already had relations with her husband. It's going to be like a negative, sort of, and according to halacha, it really is okay because it's on the minority of her body, and she's not particular about it. And many people, it's common not to be particular about it nowadays. So there is room to say such a, there are poskim that will say that it's okay in that scenario after they had relations already. But before they had relations, it seems like the poskim say that we would say, encourage her to go back to the mikvah and dunk again. And this seemingly has to do with the fact that it's not 100% clear that women are not particular about it. Now, and the other thing that I mentioned yesterday was the Ramah holds that in general, we always try to be careful not to have any intervening substance, at least in the first place. So in other words, number one, l'chatchila, the preferable thing is always make sure there's nothing intervening, and that's number one. Number two, if it happened already, so generally they would encourage a woman to go back to the mikvah. So anyway, these are the halachas about roiv and makbid. I saw in the halachic discussions about having a filling that's temporary. See, a permanent filling is when a person has a permanent filling, so that would be a case where a woman is not particular about removing it. You keep it in. But what about a temporary filling? And there seems to be a debate among the halachic authorities. Would that be an intervening substance? Which means even though the water doesn't have to go into the mouth, it has to be able to go into the mouth and cover all the areas. And if there's a temporary filling there, so temporary filling is something that a person is going to take out because ultimately they want to do work on the tooth, and it's only there temporarily. So that temporary filling could be a problem, at least according to some poskim. There seems to be a debate and a discussion about it among the poskim about a temporary filling. Yes, David.
Yeah, there was a question I was going to ask also with that. I thought there was a crown, and there's a temporary crown that's like while they're making the permanent crown, which could be for like a week or two, and a permanent crown. And I seem to remember the similar or maybe the exact same question with the crown, whether it's a temporary crown or a permanent crown, as opposed in sort of parallel the filling, whether it's temporary or permanent.
Right. Right. In other words, that there's a machlokes about it. Is that what you heard, or is that?
No, I think actually we actually asked the question. We had to actually ask the question ourselves.
I'm saying, what was the answer to such a question? Did they say it's not okay? You have to take it out, have them take it out and then put it back on?
No, I think it was that you wait until
Wait till after. Wow.
Yeah, wait until after.
Uh-huh. That you can't go to mikvah with a temporary crown. That makes
Right.
sense. I would just wonder if they would take it out for the mikvah and then, but I guess they're too nervous that it'll get infected, I guess.
Well, it's not a question of that. It's a question of the dentist is
Money.
not going to do that.
Or they'll charge you double. Right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right.
I'm pretty
So
sure that took place with Rabbi David Shochet, if I'm not mistaken. That was our
uh,
situation.
right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. So that's basically has to do with this Gemara about being makbid. In other words, you're planning on taking it out, planning on it's going to be removed. Now, something that you don't want that you're going to be removing, that would be, that would be a reason to be that it's a intervening substance. Um, so according to the Gemara, according to this Gemara, what comes out is that if it's only covering a minority portion of the body, but it's something that you don't want, so that would be a rabbinically intervening substance, and that would invalidate the mikvah. Um, if it was on the majority of the body, but you're not particular about it, that would also invalidate the mikvah rabbinically. Now, biblically, or according to the halacha l'moshe Sinai, it would need to be both. It would need to be the majority of the body is covered, and the person is particular about it. That would be the halacha l'moshe Sinai. That would be where it invalidates the mikvah. So the Gemara then also mentioned that if you don't have either of these, it's only on minority of the body, and it's only on, and it's not something that you're particular about. So on that, we're not going to make a gzeira l'gzeira. We're not going to make one decree for the other decree. It ends up being only one decree. We only make one decree. We don't make a second decree of such a thing. But as I mentioned, that lechatchila, we are makbid to be careful about these things, and we don't rely on this leniency that the Gemara seems to say is acceptable. And then the Gemara talked about the law of machitzin, that um, this 10 tfachim minimal size for a wall, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the source of mechitza is a halacha l'moshe Sinai. It's a tradition given to Moses at Sinai. Reb Meir also agrees with this halacha l'moshe Sinai. The problem is that he doesn't really need it, because he holds that there's a way to learn the 10 tfachim rule from the cherub's wings that hovered over that covered over a empty space of 10 handbreadths. And so you see from there that sukkah is on top of a hollow space of 10 handbreadths, and that is the size of that would be the minimum size of a sukkah. So what does he need this special law given to Moses at Sinai? So on that, the Gemara said that Reb Meir is going to use it for good, for lavud, and for doifen akuma. And I mentioned good there's a law of good asik, which means you elevate the wall, even though it's only on the bottom half of the sukkah. We consider the wall that it goes all the way up. I mentioned it also applies to good achis, which means if you have the wall on the top half, we consider the wall to go all the way down. And the law of lavud is that within 3 hand breaths is considered attached. And daifet akuma is also that we attach a wall even though it's far away, because we consider the wall to be a bent wall, and we can include the schach that's um, uh, maybe under this roof to be part, or we include the roof as part of the wall, and ultimately the schach that's kosher is connected to the wall and make it a kosher sukkah. Now, some of you had asked me about good achis, about this idea of having a wall that's hanging from the upper half, that doesn't really work, that we consider it the wall to go down. In other words, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, I said, would allow that wall to be considered like it's a solid wall. Like if you did your sukkah, the top half of the sukkah, and we could consider it that the bottom half is also considered a wall. Some of you asked, that doesn't work, because needs to be blocking the goats from coming, the young goats from coming through. Otherwise, it's not a wall. And the truth of the matter is, it's a machlokes. There's an argument in the Mishnah later on about it, and you're right according to halacha. But there is a view that in the Mishnah that says that that it does work for a sukkah, and so according to that view, this would be a case of good achis that is a part of the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So that's number one. So there is such a view that good achis works. In addition to that, the idea over here, this halacha l'Moshe Sinai, applies to Hilchas Shabbos. So what you were mentioning was that it doesn't work. That's regarding Hilchas Sukkah. Regarding Hilchas Shabbos, there are this is considered like a can be considered a private domain. You have a wall on the top, so it could be considered that the wall goes down and make it into a different domain that would be allowed to carry regarding the laws of Shabbos. So there are concepts of a wall coming down, and that would be part of this halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Okay, so that's the previous Gemara. Then we had a Gemara about the three walls of a sukkah. How do those three walls, what do they consist of? So the Gemara brought a brisa. Brisa said that two of the walls are kihil chasan, like the halacha. They have to be 7 handbreadths. The third one was even a tefach, even just 1 handbreadth. And then we had the opinion of Reb Shimon that says that you need 3 walls that are kihil chasan, that are according to the halacha. That means that they are 3 walls that are 7 handbreadths width, or maybe you could say length, 10 tefachim high, 7 handbreadths length. And the 4th wall could even be a tefach 1 handbreadth. So it seems to be a debate over here in this brisa as to how many walls a sukkah needs, and which wall does the halacha l'Moshe Sinai teach us that it's enough to have, that there's that it's okay to have just a tefach for the 3rd wall. Now, the Gemara is going to try to figure out what the source of this is. The source is based on the psukim, on the verses that talk about sukkah. The verses spell the word sukkos generally without any vavs. It says sukkos, and it says it 3 times. One of the times it has a vav, the end, 2nd vav, once. All the other times it spells it without any vav, doesn't have a vav. In the first half of the word, sukkos could theoretically have 2 vavs. You could have samech vav chaf vav saf. You could theoretically have 2 vavs in the word sukkos. and majority of the times in the Torah it doesn't have any vavs. Saf, chaf, taf, sukkos. In other words, instead of the vav, it's just a vowel that's makes it pronounced that way, but it really doesn't have the letter vav in it. When you write it, it's written without those extra letters, extra vav. Except that one time, the third time, when it mentions it, it adds the final vav one. So we have one vav in the word sukkos. Now, there's a famous argument throughout the Gemara that when we want to expound on a verse in the Torah, do we expound primarily on the way it's spelled, written, the way it's written by the scribe in the Torah scroll, or do we expound on the way it's pronounced? And though the two terms are either yesh aim lemasiras, there is a primary importance to the Masiras, to the tradition, the way it's spelled, the way it was handed over. And the Torah was handed over the way it was, it's written down. Or is it yesh aim lemikra? There is a primary importance given to the mikra, the way it's read, the way it's pronounced. So that's a famous argument throughout the Gemara. And here, our Gemara is going to try to explain these two opinions of the Brisa based on these opinions of the Yeshem Lemikra, Yeshem Lemasidras, based on the way Sukkos is spelled. That might be a source to figure out if you need 4 walls or 3 walls. And even and as we mentioned, the 3 walls maybe consist of the 3rd wall being only a tiny little wall, or the 4th wall possibly being only a tiny little wall, a tefach in its length. So now the Gemara, we're going to start the Gemara here. Tanu Rabbanan v'she'en lo sholish tefanos. We're on page 6b, and we must be about 10 lines from the top of the page. V'she'en lo sholish tefanos. Now, if you have the art scroll, we are on page 6b2. 6b2. Okay. So v'she'en lo sholish tefanos, if it doesn't have 3 walls, the Mishnah said it's puzzle, it's invalid. Now, what that means, the understanding of the Mishnah, is that it needs to have 2 walls and a 3rd wall that is a tefach. That would seemingly be the understanding of the Mishnah. When we learned it, that's how we understood it, that Sukkah needs 3 walls, which basically means 2 walls plus a little. But here, the Gemara brings a brisa that doesn't necessarily agree with that halacha, and it brings an opinion of Reb Shimon that says, no, you need 3 walls plus a little extra for the 4th wall. So let's see it inside. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa, shtayim kil choson, 2 walls are as the regular halacha, which means that there needs to be 7 hand breadths for their length. And this is 2 walls. We're talking about a right angle. So there's 1 wall and then a perpendicular wall. The corners meet. And that is these 2 walls. And the 3rd one, ushlishas afilu tefach, even just a handbreadth, tiny bit, that would be good enough for the 3rd wall. And obviously the 4th wall doesn't need anything. Reb Shimon argues, and he says, shalosh kehil chosan, you need 3, like the halacha, which is the size of the measurement that we mentioned, 7 hand breadths, 3 walls that are 7 hand breadths long, and that would mean like the letter ches. And he says, "Uravias afilu tefach." And the 4th wall, even if it is a tefach, a hand breadth, that would be good enough for the 4th wall. But my komifligi, what are they arguing about? Rabbanan savri yeshem lamaseris. The rabbis hold that there is a primary importance to the Messiah, to the way the Torah was given over, handed over in its written form, the way Moshe wrote it and gave it over to the Jewish people. And there is primary importance to expound. We expound on that way that it was given over, meaning in a physical form, the way it's written, and therefore, well, as we'll soon see momentarily, that the way it's written is with only one of the words sukkahs has an extra vav, and the others don't. So we're going to expound based on that as if the words are going to say sukkahs, because even though it's pronounced sukkahs, but it's not spelled in that way. So we're going to be expounding it. It's going to end up that it says it less times. If you go by the way it's pronounced, so then it sounds sukkahs every time you say it. Every time it's written, it's pronounced in the way of sukkahs. And if that's so, that is going to be a plural each time. So now we'll see as I just explained it. So the rabbis hold Yeshem L'Masayres. There's importance to we give primary importance to the way it's handed over and written. Reb Shimon Savar, Reb Shimon holds Yeshem L'Mikra. There's primary importance to the way it's pronounced, it's read. Rabbanan Savri Yeshem L'Masayres, Basukos, 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 Basukos. The rabbis say there's an importance to the way it's given over. And if you look at the way it's spelled here, this is the way it's actually written in the Torah. Basukah. It's actually, if you want to pronounce it the way it looks like it would be basukas, basukas, basukos. So we've got two singular and one plural. Hare kan arba. You add that together, 1 + 1 + 2 equals 4. Now, if it says 4 times sukkahs, sukkah, going to teach us about the walls of the sukkah, but we need one to just tell us dal chad legufei. You need one that tells us about, we're talking about the holiday of sukkahs, so we need one for its own purpose, and the others we can darshan expound. But one it has to say. Tell us that we're talking about sukkah, a sukkah. So it needs one, and it's one it needs to say. So what are we left with? Pashlu tlasa. So we have 3 words, or there's 3 sukkahs that the Torah is telling us something about. That there's something about 3, because one we need for its own to tell us the simple rule of a sukkah. And so the other 2 are going to tell us, the other 3, are going to tell something special. What would that mean? That you need 3 walls. However, Shtayim is Kilchasan. What about these 3 walls? 2 of them would be like the regular size. Vasi Hilchasa, Vigarata Lashlishis, Vaikimta Atefa. And the third, the Halacha L'Maisha Messinai comes. The fact that it says Mechitza and the walls teaches us a special law about these walls, and that the third wall doesn't need to be a full-size wall. We change it, we lower it into a tefach, that the third wall would come and be kosher, even if it's only a tefach length.
Rabbi, question.
Yeah.
I know that this is going to be, so I'm gonna leave it up to you as to when you want to answer it. And my question is the terminology, which I guess is an idiomatic expression, emle, which lemikra, emle, lemasoet. How did that come out to be the idiomatic expression to represent that there is, I don't know, something to which you depend upon in order to explain it, either as something that comes from the Masoret, or it comes from from the actual reading of the text. So it's an idiomatic expression. My question is, where did that idiomatic expression come from?
You want to know the word aim, the mother, or you
Yeah,
want
why
to
doesn't
know
it say
more about
avla
Masiris?
nikra? Why doesn't it say avla masoret?
Av. So you're wondering about the word aim versus av. Is that right?
Or where did that idiomatic expression come from?
So
But you can answer that anytime, it doesn't have to be now, because I don't want to break up the flow of your presentation.
so it's brought down. I did see they mention it about why it's called this with the aim and the why sometimes we use the word av for other things. Vuhain de kulhu, that sometimes says in certain Gemaras, the father of all of them is this law, and he or binyan av. Binyan av is very famous. There's a binyan av. There's a case where it says this is the rule, a blanket rule that we learn from this one law. It teaches us always all over Torah. It's called binyan av. But here we're talking about the aim. So here we use the word mother. So one of the understandings is that because a woman is a recipient and a man is the giver, so whenever it's like a binyan av, we're talking about learning, teaching this rule to all other cases in the Torah. You use the word av. When it's just talking about this law, so it's we use the term mother. It's a lashon nekeva, because female, a recipient, and so on. So that's one of the explanations. I think I might have seen another interpretation. I don't see it here, and I have to look up and see where I saw that. But anyway, so that's one way of explaining it. In any event, okay. So getting back to our Gemara, so we have the argument here. If you need 4 walls or 3 walls, and we've just explained the rabbis that the pasuk, if you go by the way it's spelled, so you basically have it as if it says the word sukkah 4 times. One of them, we need to tell us the general law of dwelling in a sukkah. So you basically have 3 extras, and those 3 would tell us that you need 3 walls. In the Halach L'Moshe Sinai comes and teaches us that you need 3 walls, but guess what? The 3rd one you can be lenient with. It could even be just a tiny amount of tefach. We'll soon see exactly what that means, but that would be the third wall would be small. Okay, then what does Reb Shimon hold? Reb Shimon holds yesh aim lemikra. We go by how it's pronounced. Now, when you think about how it's pronounced, sukkos, each one is 2. Sukkos means plural, so it means it says it like 6 times. The only thing is you still need 1 word, sukkos, for the actual law of dwelling in a sukkah. So we got to remove 1 pasuk that you can't expound upon. So what ends up happening, if you take off 1 pasuk, then you end up with 2 extra words, sukkos, and those 2 extra words mean 4. So the previous rabbi, after he removed 1, he ended up with 3. This rabbi, Reb Shimon, after he removes 1 verse, he ends up with 4. Basukos is Harekan Sheish. There's 6. You start off with 6 because each word is plural. Dal Chad Kra Legufe. You got to remove 1 pasuk because he needs 1 for the lesson of dwelling in a sukkah, and so you got to remove 1 for that. Pashu lahu arba. You're left with 4. He's left with 4. That would teach that you need 4 walls, and shalosh kehilchasan. 3 obviously need to be the right size. Asi hilchasan, the halacha l'moshe Sinai, the tradition from Moses comes and teaches us that the 4th wall could be a little lenient with. So griyasa l'revius by kimto a tefach. It's good enough if it's a tefach. So that's the first way of interpreting the argument between Reb Shimon and the rabbis, that it all boils down to how do you darshan verses that have the word sukkah is extra redundant. It must be that it's teaching us about the walls of the sukkah. And according to one rabbi, there's 3 times where it says sukkah. According to the other rabbi, it's 4 times because of the way they're understanding it. It ends up being that you either need 3 walls for a sukkah or 4 walls for the sukkah. And however many walls you need, the final wall of the sukkah, halachah l'Moshe Sinai says it would be good enough if it's only a tefach. So that would be an explanation of how you have these 2 opinions about the laws of the wall, how many walls for a sukkah. And now comes the next interpretation. The bayasema, if you want, you could say another interpretation. Dikule alma, the whole world holds yesh aim lemikra, that the way it is pronounced is the most important. Here is what we are debating about. Mar savar schacha ba'ikra. One rabbi holds that the schach needs a verse. So, according to everyone, you have 4 sukkahs. The word sukkah is 4 times. The only thing is, does that teach you need 4 walls? And maybe the 4th wall could be a tevach, but you still need 4 walls. Three solid walls. The 4th one could be small. Okay. Or no, you need 4. It says it 4 times, but one of them is teaching you the schach, that you need schach on top. The other one is teaching you about the 3 walls. So you only have 3. Then if you have a lesson that teaches you need 3 walls, and halachah l'Moshe Sinai says one of the walls could be small, it means you need 2 walls with 1 wall small. So the question is, if you need a verse to teach you about the schach. So everyone agrees, Yeshem Lemikra, we go by how it's pronounced. And you end up with 4 extra words, sukkah. But here is with what they are arguing about. This opinion holds that schach, you need, that the fact that you need a roof of schach on top of the sukkah, it needs a pasuk. And therefore, we got to use one of them to teach you the law of schach. And when it says 4 times, it basically means 1 schach plus 3 walls. And it ends up being that 2 walls plus a little bit would be the 3 of the words sukkah, and 1 schach for the sukkah, altogether 4. And that would be the extra 4 times that it says sukkah. It would teach you about the 3 walls, 2, or you could call it 2.5 walls, plus the schach. Mar Savra, and the other opinion, Reb Shimon would hold schach alei ba'ikra. The schach doesn't need a verse. We don't need to learn it from the fact that it says sukkah. And therefore, if you don't need a verse for it, because otherwise it's not called a sukkah in the first place. So according to him, it doesn't need to say it, and you don't need a verse for it. And therefore, you have sukkah spelled out 4 times. It must mean it needs 4 walls, and that would mean 3 walls plus a tefach wall for the floor. So that's a second way of understanding. Now comes the third way. If you want, you could say a third way of explaining this debate. Dekuli alma yesh aim lemasiris. Everyone agrees we go by the way it's spelled. So it ends up you only have 3. Well, seemingly, well, let's see what it says, because one opinion is going to have to change that. So Vahacha, and here, what are they arguing? This is what they're arguing about. Mar Savar Kiyasi Hilchasa Lagareya, that one pasuk is coming to minimize the 3rd wall. So you got 3 times sukkah that are extra. 1 time, the 4th time is needed to teach you the law, that you need to dwell in a sukkah, and the 3 are telling you about the 3 walls of the sukkah. The only question is, what did the halachah l'Moshe Sinai teach you? So according to one opinion, the halachah l'Moshe Sinai tells you that even the 3 walls that you need, one of them could be smaller. The other opinion says, no, you need 3 walls, and the halachah l'Moshe Sinai comes and tells you plus a little more. So it's either telling you minus a little or plus a little. Mar Savar, master holds, meaning the rabbis hold, Kiyasi Hilchasa Legareya. What does the halacha come for? It comes to minimize your obligations, that you thought you needed 3 full walls. No, 2.5 is good enough. Umar Savar and Reb Shimon holds, Kiyasi Hilchasa Lehaisif. What is the tradition from Moses to Moses at Sinai? What is that teaching you? That's teaching you that even though it says 3 times sukkah, that we know we need 3 walls, halacha Moshe Messina says plus a little. But Moshe, and add an extra 4th wall. That's the way Reb Shimon understands it. That the halacha Moshe Sinai, Hashem told Moshe, I wrote in the Torah 3, but orally I'm telling you I need a little extra. I need a little more for a 4th wall, a tefach. And that's the 3rd way of interpreting these two opinions. Here's the 4th. If you want, say as follows: that everyone agrees that halacha Moshe Sinai comes to minimize the yesh aim l'masayres, and we go by the way it's pronounced. So you got 4 times it says sukkah that are extra. And the halacha Moshe Sinai comes and minimizes. But what does it minimize? The way it's so here they're arguing if you darshan the first word. I'm sorry. Yesh aim l'masayres. We're not talking about how it's pronounced. We're talking about the way it's written. Okay, so you don't have 4. All together, there are only 4 times that it's written. We're going by yesh aim l'masayres. The way it's written is the primary way to darshan. So altogether, there are only 4 times. Now, the understanding earlier we had was you need one to teach you the general law of sukkah. But here, the Gemara questions that. And the Gemara says, here they're arguing, do you really need one to teach you the mitzvah of sukkah in the first place? Mar Savar, master holds, or Shimon holds, darshan techilos, that you can darshan even the first time that it says it. And if so, you basically have sukkah 4 times. That would mean 4 walls. Which means that even though you're using it to teach you the general law of sukkah, but we could still darshan it. We could still darshan from it something else. Darshan techilos means even though you learn it, you're using it, you still can darshan from it. And the reason why you would do that is because once we're darshaning the other verses, there's such redundancy, it allows you to darshan this as well, that you could darshan as well you could expound on the first one as well. That's what Rav Shimon holds, that you have 4. Yeah, the first one is needed to actually teach you the law of sukkah, that you need to dwell in a sukkah. But because you're darshaning the others, you can darshan this one, you can expound on this one as well. And ultimately you have 4 drushes, and that would mean that you need 4 walls. And the 4th wall could be smaller, but it needs to be a 4th wall. Umar Savar and Master says, Ein darshan techilos, you don't darshan from the first one, because that's needed for the actual mitzvah of sukkah. And therefore, you only have 3 to darshan from. That 3 means you need 3 walls for a sukkah. And the halacha Moshe Sinai comes and tells you the 3rd wall doesn't have to be a full wall, even just a tefach would be good enough. That's basically the 4 ways of explaining the argument. And now comes really like a 5th way. Here comes Rav Masna Amar. Rav Masna says, Taima de Reb Shimon, the reason why Reb Shimon holds his unique law that you need 4 walls for a sukkah, even though none of us ever heard this before. Why should you need 4? We always knew about 2 walls plus a little more. That's the halacha. But there is an opinion of Reb Shimon. And where does he get his source from? He gets his source from Pasuk in Yeshaya, Isaiah. Mehacha, he learns it from here. Talks about the Geula, talks about when Mashiach comes. The sukkah tiyel etzel yoimam. A sukkah will be for tzel, for shade, yoimam during the day, mechayrev from the heat, ulamechso lamister for protection and refuge, protection, mizerem from a storm, umimatar and from the rain. So Hashem is going to put a sukkah over Yerushalayim and protect it. And the idea is that the wicked are going to get punished, but the righteous won't be affected because they will have this protection. Now, what do we see from there? That if a sukkah is meant to protect from storm and rain, it must have 4 walls. If it's only has 3 walls, not really a protection. So you see from Isaiah that a sukkah needs to have 4 walls. And he sees it from that pasuk about 4 walls. So ultimately, he holds a sukkah needs to have 4 walls. And yeah, they have Allah that allows you to have the 4th wall to be small. But in essence, you really need 4 walls because that's what a sukkah is all about. And you see that from the pasuk in Isaiah that talks about the sukkah protecting from rain and storm, which obviously had 4 walls. So that's the basically these 5, I guess you could say 5 understandings of this debate from the between the rabbis and Reb Shimon, which we brought from a brisa about how many walls does a sukkah need. We saw in the Mishnah, page 2, the first Mishnah, the tractate that needs to have a sukkah needs 3 walls, and the 3rd wall we explained that even the 3rd wall doesn't have to be a full wall; it could be even a portion, but it definitely needs 3 walls. According to Reb Shimon, it really needs 4 walls. The 4th wall could be small, but it needs to have 4 walls. So that is Reb Shimon's view from the brisa. Now comes the Gemara and says, so where do you place that 3rd wall or that 4th wall? At least the way we understand it is it's a 3rd wall. Where do you need to put that 3rd wall? So v'oisei tefach heichan ma'amidoi, where do you put it? Amar Rav ma'amidoi keneged hayotzei. Rav says you place it opposite or next to the wall that is going out. Now, what does that mean?
The exit.
The end of the other one of the other 2 walls. That would be the way it's going out. Is that what you said, Ezra?
I said exit.
The exit. Oh, yaitse, right? The exit. You place it opposite the exit. Yeah, good. Okay, it's a good translation of yaitse. The exit is basically where the other 2 walls end. That's where you would put the near one of those ends, near one of those exits, where the end of the wall. And Amar Le Rav Kahana. So Rav Kahana says that Rav Kahana and Basi said to Rav, now we turn to page 7a, V'yamidenu keneged Rosh Tor. Why do you place it in the normal way? Bend it over a little. In this way, it will be more enveloping. It'll like close it off more. So maybe have it bent. So the example would be, let's see an example here.
They have pictures in the Gemara.
Right. So the if you look on the top of the page of regular Gemara, so you have in the Rashi over there, the top in the middle, really on the top. So you see over there, that would be the right store where it's an L shape. Then after the L, you have a little like arrow, a little diagonal, a diagonal. That would be the idea of a Rosh Tor. And the meaning of that is that it's going to be more, it seems to be more like locking it in. It looks like four walls. That's the way Rashi puts it. It makes it look like it's four walls. So that's the Gemara's question. And Shasik Rav, and Rav was quiet. So of course the question is that what's the reason why he was quiet? Either he totally disregarded what they said, or he accepted what they said. That's a question on the commentaries. But anyway, Rav was quiet. He didn't say anything. It's my nami. It was also said the base medrash. Amar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi Ma'amidoi Kedeged Ayoytze. It was said in the base medrash in the name of Levi that the third wall you place it by the exit, meaning at the end of the other two walls. V'chein morin be medrasha, and so is it taught to teach in the base medrash. Halacha l'maisa ma'amidoi kedeged hayoytze. You put it by the exit. Rav Simoin be Tema Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar. Rav Simoin, and some say Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says this, that we say it's enough that it's a tefach. So oisaloi tefach stoichik. You put a tefach that's more spread out. In other words, a tefach is a hand breath, but you could have a tight hand breath, or you could have more of a relaxed hand breath. So you put the this, that we say that it's enough that it's the size of a tefach. You make it it should be the size of a tefach soichek, which is a little more relaxed hand breath, a little bigger than a hand breath. And you put it with less than 3 tfachim next to one of those walls, one of the big walls that you have, the L-shape, the two walls that you have, you put it next to it within 3 tfachim. And if it's less than 3 next to the wall, it's considered like lavud. And this way, it's considered like it's attached to the wall. And what ends up happening is now you have a wall of 4 tfachim. Why do you have a wall of 4 tfachim? Because you have a solid wall of a little more than a tefach. Plus, it's next to 3 tfachim. It's within 3 tfachim of the wall, which means you have basically 4 tfachim, which means you have 4 tfachim of a wall. And once you have 4 tfachim of a wall, that would be considered the majority of a sukkah, of the wall of a sukkah, because 4 is the majority of 7 tfachim. 4 hand breaths is a majority of 7. And what ends up happening is that now your 4th wall is, or I should say your 3rd wall, I'm sorry. Your 3rd wall is considered like a wall. So in other words, what we thought 1 tefach is good enough, there's a whole qualification of how you have to put that tefach. Don't just think, oh, just throw a 1 tefach is good enough. Now, the understanding is that the Halacha L'Maisha Sinai basically tells you about this. The 3rd wall could be a tefach. Good enough, tefach. So the seemingly the understanding is that the rabbis made a decree that this the way to do this is that there's a certain way you have to do it. In other words, biblically, a tefach is good enough. But the way it should be done, the rabbis made a decree how to do it in a way that it covers the concept of having a 7 tfachim wall by being put in a certain position, that you have the law of lavud, which makes it attached to the other walls, which makes it considered 4 tfachim, and 4 tfachim is considered it has a certain element. It's called a domain, and it's a majority of 7. And so ultimately, you fulfill that this law, you're fulfilling the rabbinic obligation of how it's supposed to be. So that would seemingly be the understanding. And the Gemara then says, you know what? I think we're going to stop here. Sei gesund. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Rabbi.